The night was warm, and the lights of Darius Thalen's new villa shone like a palace on the hill. This was the moment he had worked for his whole life. The moment he finally owned the house he had always dreamed about. The $12 million villa was perfect, with tall glass walls, a pool glowing under the moonlight, and marble floors that reflected the chandelier light like stars. Dozens of guests filled the house, their voices blending with the music. Business partners congratulated Darius, friends laughed over glasses of wine, and his fiancée Silra Thane moved gracefully through the crowd, welcoming everyone with a smile. Everything was perfect, or so it seemed. Darius stood near the center of the hall, wearing a calm smile, but inside he felt a storm of emotions. This was his moment of triumph, yet his younger brother, Lucian Drivik, stood across the room watching him with unreadable eyes. Lucian had always been different. Charming but reckless, ambitious but unlucky. Their relationship had been strained for months, ever since Darius refused to bail Lucian out of a failed investment. But tonight, Darius wanted to put all that aside. He wanted to celebrate, to raise a glass and toast to their family's future. The music faded for a moment as the chef walked in, carrying a silver tray with a chilled bottle of champagne. The guests turned to watch as he placed it on the table near Darius. The chef smiled proudly. "For the man of the hour," he said. Darius nodded and reached for the bottle, ready to open it himself. But that's when something unexpected happened. Jareth Vaughn, a young waiter with sharp eyes, stepped close to Darius and whispered so only he could hear. "Sir," he said quickly, "I just saw your brother pour something in your glass." The words hit Darius like ice water. For a second, he froze, the sound of music and chatter fading around him. He turned his head slightly, trying not to make it obvious, and glanced toward Lucian. His brother was leaning casually against the bar, his face calm, but his fingers tapped nervously against his glass. Darius's first instinct was to confront him right there, to shout, to demand answers. But something inside told him to stay calm. If Lucian had really done something, he needed proof. He couldn't let emotion control him. Not tonight, not in front of all these people. He slowly set the glass aside, pretending he had not heard anything unusual. He thanked Jareth with a small nod and forced a smile. Then he turned back to the guests and clinked a spoon against the bottle. "Thank you all for coming," Darius said, his voice steady though his heart was pounding. "Tonight is special, not just because I bought my dream home, but because all of you are here to share this moment with me." The guests applauded and cheered, completely unaware of the tension building under the surface. As the party went on, Darius kept his glass untouched. He stayed calm on the outside, but inside his thoughts raced. Why would Lucian do this? Was it jealousy? Was he angry about the investment? Or was there something darker at play? Silra noticed Darius's distant look and walked over, her hand brushing his arm. "You okay?" she asked softly. "I'm fine," he said with a small smile. Just taking it all in. But he wasn't taking it in. He was watching Lucian carefully. Every laugh, every movement, he was memorizing it. He noticed how Lucian's eyes kept flicking to the untouched champagne glass. He noticed how he seemed restless, like a man waiting for something to happen. Minutes turned into a slow crawl. Darius's heart thumped with every tick of the clock. He was waiting to see what Lucian would do next, waiting to understand the truth before he made his move. Around him, the guests were having the time of their lives, completely unaware that a silent war had begun between two brothers. Darius stood near the balcony, looking out over the city lights. This villa, this night, was supposed to be the start of a new chapter in his life. But now he wasn't sure what kind of chapter it would be. And then, just as he took a deep breath and tried to calm himself, he saw Lucian smile faintly and glance at the glass again. The glass that still sat untouched. Darius's jaw tightened. Something was coming, and he could feel it in his bones. He didn't know yet that within the next 20 minutes, a scream would echo through this house and change the night forever. The party carried on as if nothing was wrong. Guests laughed, glasses clinked, and music filled the villa. But for Darius Thalen, the air was heavy. He could feel it pressing down on his chest. Every step he took, every smile he gave, was an act, a mask to hide the storm raging inside. Lucian Drivik stood across the room, laughing with two business partners, but Darius could see the truth in his brother's eyes. Lucian kept glancing toward the untouched champagne glass, pretending not to care, but his restless fingers tapped against his thigh, his jaw tightened whenever Darius walked past. Silra Thane stayed close, sensing something wasn't right. She leaned near Darius and whispered, You're too quiet. What's going on? He shook his head and forced a smile. Just tired. It's been a long day. But Silra didn't believe him. She knew Darius too well, knew the way his eyes scanned the room, sharp and calculating. He wasn't tired. He was watching. Darius moved through the crowd, greeting guests, shaking hands, thanking them for coming. But beneath his calm voice, his thoughts raced. If Lucien really did pour something into my drink, why? Was it simple jealousy? Or was this about money? Lucien's last investment had failed miserably. He owed people more than he could ever repay. Darius had tried to help once, but Lucien refused to change. Instead, he'd grown bitter, blaming Darius for his failures. Now, standing in the middle of this glittering villa, Darius realized the bitterness had turned into something far more dangerous. From the corner of his eye, he saw Jareth Vaughn, the young waiter who had whispered the warning. Jareth carried a tray of empty glasses, but his eyes flicked toward Darius as if checking that he was safe. Darius gave him the faintest nod, a silent thank you. The music changed to a slower tune, and couples began to move toward the dance floor. Silra tried to pull Darius with her, but he shook his head. Not now, he said softly. Instead, he drifted toward the balcony doors, opening them to let in the cool night air. He needed space to think. The city lights stretched below, a sea of glittering dots. From here, the villa felt like a fortress, yet Darius couldn't shake the feeling that danger was already inside. Behind him, he heard laughter, clinking glasses, and the hum of voices. But one sound stood out, Lucien's laugh. It was too loud, too forced. Darius turned slightly and caught Lucien staring directly at him. Their eyes met across the room. For a heartbeat, neither looked away. Then Lucien raised his own glass, gave a mocking smile, and drank. Darius's stomach tightened. He stayed calm, but his mind screamed with questions. What did you put in mind, Lucien? What were you planning? Time moved slowly, each second dragging like an hour. Darius watched as the untouched glass remained on the table, a silent threat. He kept scanning the guests, watching for any sign, any clue. The Dreven circle, their old family friends who had known them since childhood, chatted happily, unaware of the shadow looming over the night. And then it happened. A piercing scream ripped through the music. The sound was sharp, panicked, and it came from the kitchen. The entire villa fell silent in an instant. Glasses froze in hands. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. All eyes turned toward the hallway leading to the kitchen. Darius's heart jumped. He pushed past the guests and hurried toward the sound, Silra following close behind. People whispered in confusion, some gasping, others stepping back in fear. When Darius reached the kitchen, he froze. On the tiled floor lay Elric Thalos, one of the servers. His body was twisted awkwardly, his face pale, his eyes half open. Beside him was the glass, his glass, the one Lucien had tampered with. The staff crowded around in shock. One of the cooks shouted, "Call an ambulance." Another tried to shake Elric awake, but he didn't move. Darius's chest tightened as he looked down at the scene. His throat felt dry. He didn't need anyone to explain what had happened. Elric must have picked up the glass, thinking it was just another leftover drink. And now he was on the ground, paying the price for something meant for Darius. He slowly turned his head. In the doorway, Lucien stood motionless, his face pale as ash. His eyes flicked between Darius and the fallen server. For the first time that night, Lucien looked afraid. The guests began to murmur, their voices rising in panic. Some backed away from the kitchen, others demanded answers. The Dreven circle crowded together, their whispers sharp with fear. Silra gripped Darius's arm. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice trembling. But Darius said nothing. His eyes stayed locked on Lucien, and in that moment he knew the truth. His brother hadn't just betrayed him, he had tried to destroy him. The ambulance sirens wailed in the distance as the night of celebration turned into a night of fear. And in the middle of it all, Darius made a silent promise to himself. This wasn't over. The flashing red lights from the ambulance painted the villa walls in streaks of crimson. Guests crowded near the gates, whispering in shock as paramedics lifted Elric Thalos onto a stretcher. He was still breathing, though weak, and the medic assured everyone he would survive. But the image of him lying pale and motionless on the kitchen floor burned in Darius Thalen's mind. The celebration had ended. The music was gone, the laughter replaced by fear. The grand villa, which just an hour ago had felt like a palace of dreams, now felt cold and heavy. Darius stood at the edge of the hall, his eyes never leaving Lucien Drevic. His brother lingered in the corner, his face pale, his hands trembling as he gripped his glass. Their eyes met again, and this time Lucian looked away first. That alone told Darius everything he needed to know. Silra Thane stayed close beside Darius, whispering, "We need to end this party. Everyone is terrified." He nodded, his jaw clenched. He turned to the Driven circle, their family friends who had gathered in confusion. "Thank you for coming tonight," Darius said in a steady voice, though his chest was tight. "The celebration is over. Please go home safely." The guests obeyed quickly, relieved to leave. One by one, cars drove away down the long driveway until only the staff remained, quietly cleaning up shattered glasses and spilled wine. The villa grew quiet again, too quiet, the kind of silence that weighed heavily on the heart. Darius turned to Jareth Vaughn, the waiter who had warned him earlier. "Thank you," Darius said quietly. Jareth nodded nervously. "I couldn't stay quiet, sir. I saw him pour something in the glass. I thought you should know." "You did the right thing," Darius replied. His eyes shifted back toward Lucian. "Leave us." The staff obeyed, disappearing into the back rooms. Now it was just Darius, Silra, and Lucian standing in the empty hall. Darius walked slowly toward his brother. "Come with me," he said firmly. Lucian hesitated, then followed. Darius led him into a side room, away from Silra, away from the others, closing the door behind them. The two brothers stood facing each other, silence stretching between them. Darius finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "Tell me the truth. What did you put in my drink?" Lucian swallowed hard. "It wasn't poison." His voice cracked. "It was a sedative, just strong enough to knock you out for a few hours." Darius's eyes narrowed. "Why?" Lucian's hands shook as he ran them through his hair. "I didn't want to kill you, Darius. I needed time. Time to get into your office, to take the villa papers and the investment contracts. You don't understand. I'm drowning in debt. People are after me. I thought if I could just take the documents, I could fix everything before they destroy me." Darius stared at him, disbelief and rage boiling inside. "You were going to drug me in my own home, during my own celebration, so you could steal from me?" Lucian's voice broke. "I had no choice. You've always had everything, and I've had nothing but failures. You wouldn't help me anymore. You shut me out. This villa, this success, it was the final reminder that I'm worthless compared to you." Darius's chest tightened. "So you decided to prove it by betraying me? By risking innocent lives? Elric could have died tonight, Lucian. Do you realize that?" Lucian flinched, his eyes wet. "I didn't mean for that to happen. He wasn't supposed to touch it. It was meant for you, not him." "That doesn't make it better," Darius snapped. His voice echoed through the room, filled with fury and heartbreak. "You're my brother, and you tried to destroy me." Lucian dropped his gaze, shame heavy on his shoulders. "I just wanted one chance to not be the failure. One chance to stand where you stand." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Darius's fists tightened at his sides. Every part of him wanted to shout, to drag Lucian out into the street, to call the police. But another part of him remembered their childhood, the nights they shared a room, the years they stood together before life tore them apart. Finally, Darius spoke, his voice quieter but colder. "You had a choice. You could have asked me again, begged if you had to. Instead, you chose betrayal. And now there's no going back." Lucian's lips trembled. "Darius, please." "Enough," Darius cut him off. His eyes burned with anger. "You've shown me who you are, and I'll never forget it." Lucian said nothing. He just stood there, broken, as Darius turned and walked out of the room. Silra waited outside, worry written all over her face. Darius didn't explain. He simply said, "Have security escort him out." Moments later, 2 guards appeared and led Lucian toward the doors. The Driven circle, who lingered at the edges of the property, watched in silence as Lucian was forced out of the villa like a stranger. For Darius, it was more than a betrayal of trust. It was the death of a bond that could never be repaired. And as he watched his brother vanish into the night, Darius realized something chilling. If Lucian had been willing to drug him once, what would stop him from trying something worse next time? The night ended in silence. No more music, no more clinking glasses, no more laughter. The villa that had been filled with light and celebration now felt like an empty shell. The guests had gone, the Driven circle had disappeared into the night, and only a few staff members remained, quietly finishing their tasks. Darius Thalen stood alone in the grand hall, staring at the untouched champagne glass still sitting on the table. That single glass now carried the weight of everything that had happened. The warning, the scream, the collapse, and finally, the truth about his own brother. Silra Thane walked toward him, her soft steps echoing on the marble floor. She touched his arm gently. "It's over now," she said in a calm voice. Darius shook his head. "No, Silra. It's not over. It will never be over." She looked into his eyes and saw the pain there, not just anger, but heartbreak. The kind of wound only family could leave behind. Outside, security had already escorted Lucian Drevik away. Darius had given the order himself. He didn't want Lucian near him, near his villa, near his life. But even as he tried to push the thought of his brother away, the betrayal cut deeper than he expected. He walked to the balcony and stared at the city lights, glowing far below. "I wanted tonight to be about hope," he whispered. Instead, it became about betrayal. Silra leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. "You did the right thing," she said. He made his choice. But Darius stayed silent. Inside, he fought with himself. He had the power to destroy Lucian completely, to call the police, to let the world know what he had done. But a part of him still remembered the boy who grew up beside him, who once shared secrets and dreams. A brother, no matter how broken. Days passed, but the memory of that night never left him. Elric Thalos, the server who had collapsed, recovered slowly in the hospital. Darius visited him and paid for all his medical bills, making sure he would be taken care of. When Elric opened his eyes, weak but alive, Darius felt a strange relief. At least one innocent life had not been lost because of Lucian's mistake. Meanwhile, Lucian stayed quiet. No calls, no messages. He had vanished, but his absence was louder than any presence. Darius knew his brother was out there, struggling, desperate, and dangerous. One evening, sitting in his office, Darius received a letter. The handwriting was messy but familiar. It was from Lucian. "I know I hurt you. I know I betrayed you. But you don't understand what it's like to drown every day, to feel worthless, to live in your shadow. I didn't want to destroy you, Darius. I only wanted to survive. Forgive me if you can. If not, I'll carry this burden alone." Darius read the letter twice. His chest tightened. He wanted to tear it apart, but instead he placed it in his desk drawer. That night, he made a choice. He called his lawyer and ordered Lucian's name removed from every business deal, every investment, every tie they once shared. He cut him off completely. But he also sent money through a private account to quietly pay off a part of Lucian's debt. He didn't do it for forgiveness. He did it because, despite everything, blood still mattered. When Silra asked why, Darius simply said, "Because he's my brother. And even if I don't trust him anymore, I don't want him destroyed." Weeks later, the villa stood beautiful and strong, but the memory of the party haunted it. Every corner reminded Darius of what happened. The whisper from Jareth Vaughn, the scream from the kitchen, the pale face of Elric, the broken eyes of Lucian. The Dreven circle began to whisper, too. Rumors spread about what had happened that night. Some said Lucian tried to poison his brother. Others said it was only a misunderstanding. But Darius never corrected them. He stayed silent, carrying the truth like a shadow he could never escape. And though the villa was his dream come true, Darius realized that no house, no money, no success could protect him from betrayal. The deepest wounds came not from enemies, but from family. He stood again on the balcony one evening, looking at the horizon. Silra joined him, her hand slipping into his. "You're stronger now," she said. "Maybe," he replied quietly. "But strength comes with scars." The night breeze swept through, carrying the faint echo of that scream from the party, a reminder that trust, once broken, could never be fully repaired. And as the lights of the city flickered below, Darius knew one thing for certain. Lucian Drevik might be gone from his life, but the shadow of his betrayal would follow him forever.